Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders, joined by Nick Farabaugh. Thanks again for watching us here. Our second year in a row we're doing this, and Nick and I have put a lot of work into covering the 2022 NFL Draft already, and we're going to have you covered all the way up until Draft Day with an almost daily video podcast here on the site and on YouTube talking about the draft, the Steelers, the local prospects, every angle. And today we're going to talk about the Steelers flooding the market with scouts and executives and coaches down at the Liberty Pro Day to see Malik Willis. That happened on Tuesday. The first episode for this season, we talked about Pitt's Pro Day and the Steelers' interest in Kenny Pickett. So it's been a little bit of a quarterback theme early here, and I guess that's been the way it's been throughout the 22 NFL draft conversation, really all the way back to the Senior Bowl when we first realized that, yes, the Steelers are very interested in quarterbacks. They're very interested in Malik Willis specifically, and it does not seem that signing Mitch Trubisky to a free agent contract has really changed any of that. We saw the Steelers come out with a ton of personnel at the Pitt Pro Day, and yes, Kenny Pickett was the big attraction there, but you could maybe justify that as saying, well, Pitt is just across the parking lot, and yes, Pitt has a bunch of other prospects that the Steelers could want to take a look at. That's not the case for Liberty, a place where the Steelers have never sent their top brass to. There are minimal prospects in this draft other than Malik Willis. He is the big and only reason to go there, and they sent the whole house again, taking Willis out to dinner the night before. Nick, it's pretty clear they really are very interested in Malik Willis, right?
Well, we knew that all the way down in Mobile, right? I mean, we kind of walked into that when, talking to his parents right on the concourse. And so that was unusual for Mobile. You could tell there that Tomlin was kind of just hovering around Malik Willis a lot. And then, of course, here's the thing with Pitt. At the very least, you could say, okay, there's other guys there. There's DeMar Mathis. There's Lucas Kroll. There's guys that you could actually see the Steelers look at. Liberty has no one else. It's just Malik Willis. So they were there to see Malik Willis. And every step of the way, they've shown tangible interest. The Senior Bowl, they were on him crazy. That was the worst kept secret in Mobile. Steelers love Malik Willis. Me and Alan were down there. We talked to people that know that. Everyone loved Malik Willis in terms of, hey, the Steelers love Malik Willis. That was the one thing. It was like that, and the Panthers love Kenny Pickett. Those were the two big things. And then it carried through to the combine, and that's the same buzz. And they had a formal with him, and that was another prerequisite you had to meet. And then this, and they hosted him for dinner too. Obviously, they went to dinner with Malik Willis, and so they court guys, and the Steelers do a terrible job of hiding their interest in players. Najee Harris was telegraphed last year. Devin Bush was pretty telegraphed in 2019. You look at all the guys, pretty telegraphed overall. So Malik Willis is coming into that telegraphed area. I think the bigger question is if he's actually going to be there for them to actually pick.
Yeah, I don't think the Steelers make any attempt at hiding who they like, right? I mean, they'll let us know. They don't always get the guys they like, but they'll let us know who they like, and they're not really shy about doing that. And it's pretty clear they really like Malik Willis. I agree with you. And then Mel Kiper just had him in his latest mock draft to the Steelers at number 20. To me, I just don't see that as being realistic. I think that Malik Willis will go much higher than that. And I can't, we talked about this yesterday, same real conversation with Kenny Pickett, except even to me, more likely that Willis is gone by then, because he's a player that is going to need some time in the NFL. So the teams that are quarterback needy right now, that have a big need right this second, yeah, they could look at Malik Willis because obviously they don't have a quarterback of the future. But even teams that have seemingly addressed their quarterback position or have a quarterback, like this could be another Trey Lance type of situation, right? Where a team that already has a quarterback could be like, well, look, this guy's just okay. Maybe we can do better, and look at Malik Willis and say, this is the guy that's going to make us better. There are very few teams that I can sit here today and just say, no, they're not taking him. Very, very few, just because I think he has such a high upside. And so to me, the idea of him making it through all those teams all the way to 20 some teams that don't have any quarterbacks, sometimes that have an unsettled future quarterback situation. A team like the Eagles, which could very easily let somebody trade up ahead of the Steelers. There's just so many possibilities there. I have a real hard time seeing him make it through to 20.
The first possibility is number 2 overall. I mean, that's a very realistic possibility. It's gaining more and more steam. The Lions like Malik Willis. That's been the big buzz, right? And then they also have their pick at 32 to where they can easily have enough capital. They have 32 and 34 to where they can come up and go jump the Steelers at 20 pretty easily. They have enough draft capital to do it. And Jared Goff's there. He's only there for 1 more year. That's a natural fit. Dan Campbell might want his own quarterback. You see, you connect the dots right there. That's pretty simple. They could easily take him. Heck, Houston could take him. I mean, 3 overall, that could happen. Davis Mills has shown some things, but he's by no means entrenched there. I mean, Carolina, I don't think the Giants are going to take him. I think that if we're talking trade up for Pittsburgh, I think it's going to be one of the Giants picks, 5 or 7. That's where they're going to have to jump up into. Because you look at other teams that might need quarterbacks, they're not going to want to jump all the way down if they like guys like Corral or Pickett or whoever they might like. If they also like Willis, of course, you're going to want to jump in front of them. So outside of that, Carolina could take Willis again. I know they love Pickett, but you never know. Atlanta, I think, is a good spot for Willis as well. I think they make a lot of sense now that Matt Ryan's gone. That threw a bit of a wrench in the quarterback plans in terms of this draft. Like everything from 2 to 9. Seattle there could easily take Malik Willis. They obviously need their quarterback. Easily could have a 1 year where he sits behind Drew Lock and then takes over next year. And just going down, Washington could easily take him. Carson Wentz could be out of there. The Vikings are probably one of the teams out of the equation now that Kirk Cousins got his extension.
And then Browns, Houston has the Browns pick. Yeah. So, I mean, that's that's turned into a very, very good spot to take a Malik Willis. That'll be their second pick of the draft. They can get their quarterback of the future. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And then,
so,
New
Orleans. Yeah.
And so, and even teams below them, like Tennessee, maybe could move on from Tannehill if they want to come up and get their big guy and make their move in the AFC as Derrick Henry's prime's coming into its own, A.J. Brown's prime. I think that's a sleeper option where Tennessee might want to come up and get a dynamite guy like Malik Willis. There are teams here that make a lot of sense to come up and get Malik Willis. And so just the path to 20 is very, very, very narrow to me. And I think, we said this about Pickett too, I think his path's also pretty narrow to Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh's going to want one of these top 2 quarterbacks. They're going to have to trade up to do it.
Oh, well, I mean, that's the big question, right? Do you think the Steelers like Malik Willis enough that they will be able to, that they will be willing to trade up to get him, and how far? Like for me, I can see a scenario where Willis gets past Houston at 13 and the Steelers want to get ahead of New Orleans and make sure that nobody else gets ahead of them and move up from say 20 to 15 where there's the first of the 2 Eagles picks and say, all right, he fell that far. Let's go get him. Let's go up 5 spots. To trade into the top 10 where you're like, we're going to go into this draft and say, we are getting Malik Willis. I don't know. That's going to cost a lot. The Steelers have a ton of future needs, and I'm just not sure the whole way they've approached this offseason jives with that approach. If they were going to make that kind of hugely aggressive move to say Malik Willis is our guy, let's trade into the top 5 where the Giants are to get him. Why would they sign Mitch Trubisky? Why would they? Well, I don't know. You don't need a bridge guy if you're going to go get the next guy right now. You could have signed Andy Dalton or Ryan Fitzpatrick if you didn't like Mason Rudolph for 1 year. I just think they've gone into this offseason setting themselves up to take best player available at 20, not need to trade up to go make sure they get one guy.
I do think that they don't want to necessarily trade up, but I think for Malik Willis they will, and I really do. I think they've set up this whole offseason to engineer a trade up for Malik Willis, specifically Malik Willis. I say it, they're not going to trade for Pickett, they're not going to trade for Corral, they're not going to trade for Hal, Ritter, whoever else. They're not going to trade up for them. Only Malik Willis. And the reason I say it is because you knew Malik Willis was going to need someone with a similar type of play style, at least, that could move had experience in the Canada system, moving, showcasing what the system it actually is, play action, a little bit more motion, stuff like that. Trubisky brings that. They probably couldn't do a lot of that stuff with Mason Rudolph. So in that case, it makes more sense to me. And then Malik Willis obviously would sit behind Trubisky for a year, marinate, learn, come in 23, start. So that makes sense to me. I think from that perspective, a trade for Malik Willis makes complete sense. The question is how much they're going to go up. Now, obviously, they went up 10 spots to get Devin Bush back in 2019. So they're clearly at least willing to move up 10 spots. Here's the issue. They're going to move up further than that. If you really want to feel comfortable, and this obviously assumes he gets past Detroit. If he goes number 2 overall, they're not getting him, period. It's not happening. They're not trading up for 1. Jacksonville's not trading out of that spot. They're going to get a premium player to surround Trevor Lawrence with. So,
and if the Steelers are making noise about trading up and Houston has them on the radar, it's not really that big of a deal for them to say, well, we'll just take Willis at 3 and go to a different position at 13 either.
Yeah, it like even if the Steelers wanted Malik Willis at all costs and they were saying, okay, we're willing to trade up to number 1, why wouldn't the Jaguars just take a deal from the Lions and move back 1 spot? The Lions would just trade number 2 overall. It's a bigger asset than anything Pittsburgh has. And that includes probably TJ Watt. So, yeah, that's the type of stuff we're talking about here. If he goes 2 overall, everything's out. But if you're thinking comfortable where you would get Malik Willis, say he gets past 2 and 3, 5 with New York would make the most sense to me. 7 with New York if he gets past Carolina and they're going to be penciled in for Pickett. One of those Giants picks, 5 or 7, is where you would trade up to, in my opinion. So we'll see. That would cost a lot. That cost this year's first and next year's first, and at least one of 52 and 84. Maybe you throw in a player there to get rid of some of the, maybe you throw in like a Chase Claypool, if you think that relationship's souring a little bit, to maybe ease a little bit on the draft capital spots. But yeah, they're gonna have to give up a lot to do it. But they've set themselves up, I think, to trade up for Malik Willis, or only Malik Willis. Other than that, I think they've set themselves up for BPA to whoever is 20.
I agree that they could trade up from Willis. I'm with you. I don't think a trade all the way up to 5. I mean, that's 2 first-round picks plus, basically. I have a hard time seeing them do that. Maybe, like I said, to 15, where that trade, is basically just 52. I think I could see that making sense for them. To get ahead of that pack of Washington 11, Minnesota 12, Houston 13, Seattle 9, Atlanta 8. Man, it's a lot. It's a lot, and like you said, that's going to be competitive. If the Steelers want to trade up from 20, who's to say that Seattle doesn't want to trade up from 9? Who's to say that Atlanta doesn't want to trade up from 8? And there's plenty of options there as well if you're a team that's looking to trade down. That's why I just think that's a very narrow path as well to try to see the Steelers getting into the top 5 to secure Malik Willis. I think the most likely way that he ends up on their team is that he falls down the board a little bit and then they come up to get him the rest of the way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've talked about it both with, Detroit, Atlanta, Seattle. All those teams have a stronger draft asset because they are going to be a top 10 team. And a team like the Giants, needing tackle help, they're not going to want to trade back all the way to 20 unless they like a guy like Penning or Raymond or someone like that, when they could have a realistic shot at Charles Cross, right? And so
you need tackle and edge help, and there's 5 good tackles and edges, and that's it. So
exactly,
they're not going to want to go down that far.
So if they want a guy, so say they want a pair of like Karlaftis and Cross, they're not going to trade back to 20 because both those guys are maybe not going to be on the board. Or if Thibodeau's falling down the board, which it seems like he is right now, and Hutchinson's going to go earlier, and then Thibodeau's going to be there, a realistic option 5 or 7, they're not going to pass stuff like Kayvon Thibodeau at 5 or 7. And then you compare Thibodeau with Cross, that's a home run draft for New York. I mean, that's the exact type of draft, the ideal draft for them. So they're not going to trade out of that spot. You're going to have to really sweeten the deal. Pittsburgh's going to have to put more into the trade-off so they can entice the Giants or whoever it would be to take that deal over Atlanta, over Seattle, and move back from wherever they are to 20 they're going to have to give up more to do that. That's probably going to be a competitive market. If they know the Steelers like Malik Willis enough, teams are going to trade up and block it. It's straight up. That's how it's going to work.
So then, to me, is Willis good enough and a sure enough thing to make that big aggressive move worth it? I mean, we know the Steelers like him, but I guess it's not really clear. Do they like him at 20? Do they like him at 15? Do they like him mortgaging a significant portion of their future to go up to 5 to get him? I think he's a really talented player, but I don't know that I would be willing to make that aggressive of a move for a guy who has a decent chance of just being a total bust in the NFL. Like there's flame out potential here.
His floor is literally unplayable. I mean, that is what his floor is. His ceiling is obviously like top 3 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, we're talking about if he hits and he hits, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. You will rival anyone in the NFL with Malik Willis if he becomes what he could be. But again, that's such a high risk issue. And I think he has really good qualities with the athleticism, with the arm talent. I really think his intangibles are through the roof as well. So I think that's good. If you're a raw prospect, especially a quarterback, your intangibles need to be good. This is part of the reason why Josh Allen worked out, because his intangibles are through the roof. And so that's good signs. But again, in any other class, Malik Willis is like quarterback 4. Like he's not QB1. He's QB1 in this class. This is a weak quarterback class. Some people are comparing him to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was leaps and bounds more ready to play at the NFL level than Malik Willis was. I think Trey Lance was more ready, and Trey Lance didn't play last year. Malik Willis has a really sharp learning curve here. I mean, if you play him in year 2, I'm not certain he's going to be ready to play in year 2. That's how raw he's going to be. And again, he seems like a quick learner. He has great intangibles, but so raw from a mechanical standpoint. His eyes aren't very good. He really gets happy-footed in the pocket. He's got a lot of things to work on as a whole. So we'll see. The dynamic ability is there, but he's got that bust potential. Who's to say? And again, Pittsburgh, the roster's going to – I know they're in the AFC, but the roster's good enough now where you're probably going to see them in like limbo next year, maybe that 15, 16, 17 range, or they'll sneak into the back half of the playoffs again. It's not a bad roster overall. It has holes, but it's actually a pretty decent roster overall. They could steal a few games from teams. So are they really going to be in a position next year? And you have to put this, are you going to be in a position next year where you can get Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or whoever, Tyler Van Dyke? But it looks like a deeper class next year. So maybe you'll have 4 or 5 options like you did, say, in 2020 versus this year, where you really only have maybe 1 or 2 legit options.
Yeah. And I think there's a bit of there's a lot of misconceptions about Willis as well. Like he is obviously an incredible athlete. He has great arm talent. I don't really think there are any questions about his physical abilities, right? I mean, if you were going to go make a quarterback prospect out of like just clay, it looked like him, right? I mean, I guess he could be a little bit taller, but I mean, he's fast. He's got a strong arm. He's got a fairly accurate arm. To me, it's all about processing, decision-making, and on the field sort of leadership and maturity things, and the ability to know what a defense is doing and go to your second and third and fourth progressions, to be able to make changes to the play at the line based on what you're seeing from a pre-snap read. None of those things were things that he did in college. In college, it was a one look and run kind of deal. And that was a great thing for Liberty. It's not like they were asking him to do more and he wasn't capable of it, because honestly, they could have just let him run on every play. And that probably would have been a very successful offense for them, because he's so good at it, especially at that level. So it's not like he's not, we can see that he's not capable of doing these things. We just don't know if he's capable of doing those things. And that's why, you can't really learn that at a pro day. You can't even really learn that at the Senior Bowl, where they're put in a much more difficult position than Willis was in Tuesday's pro day with the Steelers and the Panthers and all these teams there. Did he do anything Tuesday that changes anything for you or showed anything?
I mean, he showed his arm talent was there. He looked accurate. It was pretty much his film. I mean, everything you saw on Tuesday, you saw on his film. I know there was the one throw where he was celebrating and everyone was excited and all of that. He put that, I was on his film multiple times. He's made absurd throws and unbelievable throws, and this is why his stock is where it is right now. And the thing about Malik Willis is, even at the pro day, you could tell he's comfortable letting it rip in whatever position he wants. So he'll take cover to a hole shot. He'll throw it up the seam, even if it's a tight window. He can make those tight window throws that few can, which makes him really special in that regard. But again, you can't get the actual on-field stuff just yet. The issue is Liberty is terrible. I mean, their supporting cast, if they did not have Malik Willis, there's a chance that team goes 0-12. They're that bad talent-wise. I mean, that team is terrible. The offensive line was awful. The receivers didn't know how to track the ball and had bad hands. I mean, he really had no help at all. So it was really just the Malik Willis show. So was he trying to do too much because there was nothing else around him? I don't think the scheme was particularly strong either. I don't think he was in a good situation there at Liberty. So maybe there's a little bit of projection here to where you could say, okay, get him into a more stable environment, and then he's going to blossom a little bit more, because everything at Liberty was really bad. And I think that also muddies the waters a little bit here. Maybe he is only one true year away, because the situation at Liberty was just so bad where he could really pick up in a stable environment and NFL offense that'll be able to go quick for him.
I do think the thing that, to me, Willis has shown people throughout this pre-draft process is his personality. I think that is something, even Kenny Pickett at a place like Pitt, we see him on TV all the time, right? I mean, you see a Matt Corral, you see a Sam Howell. These guys have been interviewed over and over again. And while you don't really know the person, you sort of get a sense for what a person is like when you see him in all those situations, and you see him on national television over and over again, get put in tough spots. You see him have success and failure and how he reacts to it. I don't think the world has really seen much of Malik Willis until this pre-draft process. And I think what he's shown is pretty impressive. He has a very mature mindset. He was funny and personable and fun and energetic. And I don't know how far those things go, but when you're talking about taking a leap on a guy and making a gamble on a player being able to make a progression or to transfer a skill that we haven't necessarily seen, I think it's a lot easier for a team to get on board with that if they like the person. And it seems pretty clear that a lot of NFL teams, including the Steelers, do really like the person, and I think that matters.
Oh, yeah, it does. And again, this goes back to when you're a raw prospect, what are your tangible qualities? Do you have a work ethic? Do you have the personality that's going to be leader? Are you going to be a leader? Are you going to put in the work that's going to take? Because you're going to have a tough uphill climb compared to a college prospect like Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's going to go to the NFL. He's going to have to work. But if he puts in the work, he can. He'll be a fine quarterback. Malik Willis has to put in the work, and even then, it's not gonna, it might not work out, but he has that aspect of it. The guy clearly, the intangibles are through the roof on Malik Willis. I keep saying that. I think that's a really important quality here. Were his intangibles up to par to say this could work out? I have been convinced throughout this process. I think the intangibles are all there from Malik Willis. He's interviewing well, reportedly, doing really well on the whiteboard. He understands what teams are doing. He understands the coverages and everything. It sounds like he's very football smart. So maybe it's just, reining him in a little bit on the field and trying to get him a little bit more control in the pocket. And that's what's going to happen. I think he has all the makings. A quick learner. He's a good leader. He's vocal. Everything about him, his personality is infectious. Everything about him screams great intangibles. So good to have that in your quarterback. And obviously when you're a raw quarterback, kind of like with Trey Lance last year, had a lot of the same qualities. You see that with Malik Willis here. I
think there's a decent chance that this pick ends up being Malik Willis, whether it's at 20 or whether it's a trade up. Would you agree with Kuiper? Do you think that's the most likely guy? I kind of feel like it is right now. Anyway, maybe not necessarily like a big plurality, but I haven't seen the Steelers show as much interest in anybody else that I think is going to be reasonably likely to be available to them.
I think he's the most likely guy right now. I mean, if you put the top two guys on the board, I mean, it would probably be Pickett and Willis, right? I mean, Willis 1, Pickett 2. I think they've shown enough interest in both of those guys to where you could tangibly say that. And so I think Willis right now is the clear front runner though, because you see they went out of their way to go see him. The Senior Bowl was just such a telegraphed interest. You should not be able to tell interest from the Senior Bowl. I mean, you could tell right now, but we'll see kind of how everything ends up, because there's a lot of moving parts to this entire thing. It's obviously going to be, it has make it. How much are you willing to give up in order to get him? That's going to be the question here. And then outside of quarterback, you know, they're still scouting guys outside of quarterback. So clearly they have these options on the table. It's not like they're going all in on quarterbacks. They obviously are doing a quarterback tour, but they clearly have, I think, their top two guys. And so we'll see. I think today's Ole Miss's pro day, but Ohio State's pro day as well. So if they go to Ohio State's pro day, throw Garrett Wilson and other guys into this hat, ring over a guy like Matt Corral, and then you can say, okay, these are their two quarterbacks that they really want to take a look at.
We will be following the process all the way through until the first round of the draft on the 28th of April. Nick, anything final on the Willis Pro Day before we wrap things up for today?
Not much. I thought he did good for himself. I think, again, Malik Willis has been one of those guys that the whole step of the way has done as good as he can. So we'll see how everything ends up. I'm very interested to see what the Steelers' interest in trading up would be. I'll say that. I think that's the biggest variable that you don't know. The interest is there, but what are they going to have to give up, and how much are they willing to give up?
Yeah, I agree. So tomorrow we will be at the Penn State Pro Day. We'll have reaction from that here, as well as all kinds of coverage at Steelers Now and at Nittany Sports Now on those Penn State prospects. Jahan Dotson, Jaquan Brisker, Rasheed Walker, I think all seem to fit the Steelers' needs, as well as a bunch of other players. I think they had 8 or 9 guys at the combine. It's a loaded draft class for Penn State, and I'm sure that the Steelers brass will be there as well. It's one of their pretty regular stops, so we'll have plenty more to report from that. If you have another topic for us as we go forward here through the month of March and into April, leave a comment or hit us up on Twitter. If there's something you want us to cover, Nick and I have been following this draft as closely as anyone, from the college football season through the pre-draft process at the Senior Bowl, the Combine, Pro Days, and we want to bring all that knowledge to you here on Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So definitely hit us with a comment and like and subscribe to Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube, so you get the first crack at every new episode, which will be basically daily here as we lead up to the 2022 NFL Draft. For Nick Farabaugh, I'm Alan Saunders. Thanks for listening and watching and reading and following all of our content as we lead up to the 2022 NFL Draft with Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.